Francois Pinault's father walked away from their Brittany farmhouse on a frozen February morning in 1947, leaving his 11-year-old son standing in the doorway with nothing but a torn cloth bag and 2 stale bread crusts. The man never looked back, never said goodbye, and never explained why he was abandoning his child to fend for himself in post-war France. Either young Francois would find a way to survive the brutal reality of complete abandonment, or he would become another forgotten casualty of a country still rebuilding from devastation. At 11 years old, Francois weighed just 52 pounds and had never spent a single night away from his family's stone cottage in Les Champs-Giroux, a village so small it didn't appear on most maps. His father, Louis, had been a struggling timber merchant who owed money to half the countryside, drinking away what little income the family scraped together from their failing wood business. When creditors started showing up at their door demanding payment, Louis made a choice that would haunt his son forever. He simply disappeared, leaving Francois to face the consequences alone. The boy's first night of abandonment was spent shivering in the village church, where the local priest found him curled up behind the altar at dawn, his lips blue from cold. Father Marseille took pity on the child and arranged for him to work at a local sawmill in exchange for meals and a place to sleep on the factory floor. For the next 3 years, while other children his age attended school, Francois worked 12-hour shifts hauling timber and operating dangerous cutting machinery that had already claimed fingers from grown men. But what happened next would prove that abandonment, rather than destroying him, had forged something unbreakable inside the young boy. Here's where Francois Pinault's method became unstoppable. First, he turned his childhood abandonment into a competitive advantage by developing an instinct for identifying when people were about to betray or abandon him. He learned to read micro-expressions, voice patterns, and behavioral changes that signaled someone was preparing to break their word. This early warning system allowed him to always have backup plans and alternative partnerships ready, something that would save his business deals repeatedly in later years when competitors tried to sabotage his negotiations. Second, he weaponized his experience with brutal poverty to out-endure any competitor in business negotiations. Having survived on 2 meals a day for years, he could sit through 18-hour negotiation sessions while well-fed opponents grew tired and made mistakes. In 1963, when negotiating his first major timber contract worth $45,000, he deliberately scheduled meetings during lunch hours and refused all food offerings, watching as his opponent's blood sugar dropped and decision-making deteriorated. He closed the deal for 30% below market price while his competitors struggled to think clearly. Third, he developed an uncanny ability to spot undervalued assets that others overlooked, a skill born from having to scavenge for survival as a child. He would spend weeks studying financial statements, visiting facilities personally, and talking to workers on factory floors to identify hidden value that accountants missed. When he acquired his first retail chain in 1972, he discovered warehouse inventory worth $200,000 that wasn't properly recorded on the books, profit that immediately doubled his investment return. Fourth, he built loyalty through extreme generosity to those who proved trustworthy, remembering what it felt like to have no one he could depend on. When employees demonstrated genuine commitment, he would surprise them with bonuses worth 6 months' salary or promote them far beyond their experience level. This created a core team of managers who would literally work around the clock for him, giving Pinault's companies execution speed that competitors couldn't match. Fifth, he accumulated capital through paranoid financial discipline, never forgetting the terror of having absolutely nothing. Even as his business grew, he maintained personal living expenses equivalent to a middle-class lifestyle and reinvested every possible dollar back into acquisitions and expansion. By 1980, while competitors were spending profits on executive perks and lavish offices, Pinault had amassed $20 million in cash reserves that positioned him to buy distressed companies during the next economic downturn. If that wasn't enough to test everything he had learned, the 1982 recession nearly destroyed the retail empire he had spent 15 years building. Interest rates in France hit 23%, making it impossible to finance inventory or expansion. 3 of his major retail chains were losing money simultaneously as consumer spending collapsed across Europe. His primary competitor, Carrefour, had deeper pockets and was deliberately starting price wars to drive smaller retailers into bankruptcy. Bank executives who had courted Pinault during profitable years suddenly refused to return his phone calls, leaving him with $8 million in debt payments due within 60 days and no clear source of funding. And just when it couldn't get worse, his largest supplier, a German manufacturing company that provided 40% of his inventory, announced that they were terminating his contract to partner exclusively with Carrefour, meaning Pinault would lose access to the most popular product lines just as the critical holiday shopping season approached. His retail locations would have empty shelves while competitors offered everything customers wanted. What he did next changed everything. Instead of trying to compete directly with Carrefour's deep pockets, he made a bet that seemed insane to everyone who knew him. He liquidated his entire retail operation, selling all his stores to competitors at below-market prices, and used the $12 million in proceeds to start acquiring luxury brands that were struggling during the recession. His first target was a small leather goods company called Gucci, which was facing bankruptcy after years of family infighting and poor management. While other investors saw a dying Italian brand with outdated designs, Pinault recognized the same pattern he had learned to spot as a child: valuable assets that appeared worthless because of temporary circumstances. He acquired a controlling stake in Gucci for $18 million in 1999, immediately bringing in new designers and modernizing their production methods. The transformation was spectacular. Within 3 years, Gucci's annual revenue jumped from $500 million to $2.1 billion, as Pinault's operational discipline and marketing investments turned a struggling brand into a global luxury powerhouse. Fashion editors who had written off Gucci as irrelevant were suddenly calling it the most innovative luxury house in Europe. But Pinault didn't stop with one brand. Using Gucci's success as collateral, he systematically acquired Saint Laurent, Bottega Veneta, Balenciaga, and Alexander McQueen, creating a luxury conglomerate that controlled some of fashion's most prestigious names. Each acquisition followed the same pattern: buy distressed luxury brands below their true value, then apply the operational discipline and long-term thinking he had developed during his years of abandonment and survival. The ultimate vindication came in 2005 when Pinault renamed his company Kering and watched its market value reach $40 billion. The man whose father had abandoned him for being worthless now controlled luxury brands that dressed celebrities, royalty, and billionaires around the world. His annual personal income of $3.2 billion exceeded the GDP of most small countries. Today, Francois Pinault's net worth of $33.4 billion makes him the third richest person in France and one of the most powerful figures in luxury retail. The Kering empire he built from the ashes of abandonment generates $20.3 billion in annual revenue and employs over 45,000 people across 6 continents. The boy who was left with nothing but bread crusts now owns a $200 million art collection and has donated over $1.8 billion to charitable causes, more generosity than his father showed in an entire lifetime. From abandonment to absolute luxury domination. That's the true measure of turning trauma into triumph.